Welcome back inside the Stingray Show right here on Tide 100.9. Hope all is well wherever you are listening this evening. And now we are about to get to a very special guest this evening who was the coach at Bowling Green as the quarterbacks coach. Also, the quarterbacks coach at Utah, then was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Florida under Urban Meyer, then was the head coach at Mississippi State and at Florida. Guys, I have to tell you, this is one of the most brilliant minds in the game right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome to the Stingray Show, Coach Dan Mullen. Coach, how are things going with you, sir?
And it's going great. I'm gonna have to record that, right, so I get introduced that way every time. I started to switch it to like, hey, just all around good guy. But when you start with the brilliant mind or
Yes.
one of those, right? There's like movies like that.
Yes.
It's the sequel to A Beautiful Mind, A Brilliant Mind. That'll be mine, right?
Coach, you look relaxed. You looked rested. I think you're enjoying this year off, aren't you?
It's amazing that everyone came to me now, and you get out of the SEC for coaching for even less than a year, and everyone's like, boy, you look like, have you lost weight? You look younger. You look healthy. What's going on? Are you doing something different or special? I said, yeah, I'm I'm doing some TV. I'm just talking about football instead of having to live it 24/7,
Yes.
365. I'm talking about it and enjoying it.
Well, Coach, what was that transition like for you going from the field to the booth? Was that a big transition for you?
You know what? It was always something while I was coaching said, hey, one of these days, if whenever coaching ends, which, you never knew, and it probably
Right.
ended sooner than I thought it might. But it was something that I always wanted to do. And I talked to TV people about it. And I'm very fortunate. If a lot of people that know my wife know, she was a network TV anchor. She was the main
Mhm.
anchor at the Golf Channel for a while. And, uh, so I had a lot of assistance that way with TV, with the TV world, and believe it or not, I don't get. She doesn't mention a whole lot about football or boy, I don't know if you broke that play down or said the right thing about that play, but I got a lot of your hands are in this position, your eye contact has to be here, you got to like,
I was
I'll,
going to ask that question, Coach. Does your wife over criticize you when you come home?
No, but she coaches me up now. I get coached
Good.
up, It's like when the quarterback comes out, like just how I used to grab the quarterbacks when they'd come off the field. She grabs me, and I actually get text even during the show. Like, I mean, I got my phone on me, like so I'll be like looking down like a text during the show. Um, but it's a lot of fun. It's you get to talk about football, you get to evaluate all the things that have gone on. I've been really fortunate on ESPN to get to do some different things this year. Last year, um, I was at site for the SEC Nation show and College Game Day shows for both the SEC and national championship games. So I kind of started doing that, and then done a lot of in studio work on ESPN and ABC this year. Being on the college football final show weekly for a bunch of weeks now, with the wrap up show on ESPN on Saturday nights, has been a lot of fun. So, and I've got to call a couple games. So it's kind of been one of these years where they've moved me around to try different things and see where I fit or see where they like me at for the future.
Yes.
Coach, did you have a guy that you looked up to growing up doing play by play, doing football?
But I don't, I mean, I was much more players and coaches looking
Right.
up, but I mean, to me, it's all about Keith Jackson. I mean, that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
I was going to bring that name up.
I'm older, so when you're looking at the Keith Jackson, and I haven't brought it out, I haven't gone on and like, oh, he's a sophomore from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I. But when you just that's the memories of college football when you're young, and because it was different back,
It
I
was.
think. And it really wasn't all that long ago for a lot of us now, but you get spoiled so quickly where, maybe there was a couple of games, maybe each weekend, maybe a couple.
Right.
Thanksgiving, the greatest day of the year was always New Year's Day because there were so many college football games you could watch on one day. And, now you can watch every game all the time. I mean, I have 4 of them on Saturday that I'll be, in studio for for just ESPN on this Saturday. So it's changed that way. But back in the day when there weren't many, it was such a big deal to see a Keith Jackson game.
Yes.
Hey, Coach, I got some fun homework for you because I look at it every once again. And when younger people say, "Who's Keith Jackson?" I'll make a Keith Jackson reference. There's a clip on YouTube. It's a Keith Jackson Miller Lite commercial, him doing the wedding, and it's absolutely hilarious. And
Really?
he's here's the groom from Texas and the bride from Alabama. And, it's absolutely great. So yeah, look that up when we get done. Keith Jackson Miller Lite.
I have to.
It's
I
great.
will. I'll definitely do that.
Well, Coach, I would love to get your take on this because you are, a recent coach and a head coach. In your opinion, what is the biggest issue going on down at Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher?
Well, I think that a lot of there's a bunch of things that have compounded. One, they had a great recruiting class last year, and some very, very talented guys coming into the program. Now you have to remember those guys are all freshmen, and a lot of them are just showing up, and they get 18 practices before they play a game. They haven't gone through an off season. They don't know the program inside and out. So to sit there and say, okay, these guys are now the face of the program is a tough one. They had an excellent team. They lost a lot of talent over, didn't play them last year, played them 2 years ago, and they were an extremely talented football team, top to bottom. So they lost a lot of talent, and then had some young talent coming in. And I think, they had all these preseason expectations. And so when you have all these preseason expectations, unfortunately, and I don't know, I'm not inside.
Right.
But there's a lot of times you look at teams and you say, okay, hey, you know where your team is at. And you can look and say, hey, we're pretty good. I mean, if you go back, and I've been on those teams, you go back, some that you felt could be really good. I mean, at 2014 at Mississippi State, we're a training camp. I thought, boy, we have a tough schedule and how it lines up, but nobody picked us to be very good. And you're sitting there and you're smiling because you say, hey, people didn't expect much out of us, but we got a really good football team. Then there's other times where people, and you're looking at the expectations, and this probably happened at Texas A&M, I'm guessing, as the coaching staff got on there. They looked at where they were, the preseason rankings, where they were ranked, what was going on. And they're like, we're not there. We can get there, but we're not there as a team with the personnel that we have and where the development of the players are right now. And so I think that happened. They had some negative things happen early, some tough losses early. And all of a sudden, things start to spiral. And when things start spiraling, they snowballing. It's like, it's like that snowball going down the hill in the old cartoons, and it starts small, but as it goes, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's really what's gone on is I think they're probably not where this year's team's not where everybody thought they were or should be. The coaches knew that. A couple of bad things started to happen. I do know some of the guys on the staff and just in talking to them, they've dealt with some massive injuries. So when you start all of a sudden, it's like what can go wrong goes wrong. And that snowball starts building and then negativity seeps in from the outside. And everything about the program then with inside the building, and you say, hey, we want to isolate ourselves from what's going on outside. That sounds good, but it's really hard to do because, even more so for the players than the coaches, because the coaches, you're kind of in the building all day long. But the players are outside walking around campus dealing with it. And that negativity seeps in and it goes from, hey, if everyone waiting for something else to go wrong.
Yes.
I always say this, like, Jimbo's been a coach for a while, and he's coached for a long time. And if you look at his career, he's had a bunch of some good years and some bad years. He didn't forget how to coach in the bad years and remembered again how to coach in the good years. It just happens. And so the best thing that people can do and that Jimbo can do, hey, get through this season, keep the young, talented players together, build for the future. Let's evaluate what we did well and what we did poorly, and if I want to be a coach critiquing, not like, oh, the offense is terrible. Oh, this is wrong. All of these are wrong. Hey, be patient within the program. They have a lot of money invested in him. Stand up and say, hey, he's our coach. He's going to be our coach for a long time. There's no worry. Sit down and say, Jimbo, let's what they need to do is really sit there and say, what is our personnel and how do we adjust schematically around the personnel that we have? Just, you as a coach, you can never sit there and say, hey, this is our offense. We're going to run our offense. Our offense, I've always been a believer is our offense is what can our players do well and how do I put them in the best position to succeed? And I think maybe early on at A&M this year, they thought they were doing that. And as the season goes on, they realized what we thought, that's not really who we are. So we need to change as a coaching staff. We need to get around what these players do well, put them in a position to succeed. Hey, let's spend the next, right. They have 2 more weeks because it doesn't look like they're going to a bowl game this year. Let's spend the next 2 weeks building with the young guys. Make sure we're respectful to the seniors that are leaving the program and let them finish off the right way and rally and see if we can, they got a big game. See if we can kind of hammer away at LSU. They get to finish with the SEC West champion. And
Yes.
what a finish to the season would be to knock them off a week before the championship game.
Heath, you're muted.
Got it. I had the flu a couple of weeks ago, Coach, so I got this cough. Sorry.
He was waiting. He was waiting for me to keep rambling on about all that.
You're fine.
But I do. The biggest thing Texas A&M can do is sit there and say, hey, listen, we've invested a lot of money in this coach. We're not going to buy him out for that much money. That doesn't make any sense. Right. Instead of complaining or being negative, why don't we get everybody rallying around? Let's go out and have a second great recruiting class back to back. And all of a sudden we have young talent that can go win a championship. Jimbo, we're going to trust that you're going to make the adjustments inside the building that get those guys in position to succeed, all those young players. And let's all rally, stick together, and move forward instead of have people pulling in different directions, because that never works.
Right.
Coach, fun question. We've asked Chris Lowe on the show. We've asked several people this question, probably half a dozen people this question. Let's pretend you get that buyout that Jimbo's going to get, the $81 million or whatever it is this year. What's something stupid fun you're going to do with that money? I mean,
I didn't get that type of buyout for sure. So I'm just kind of like listen, I'm not going to say life's rough for us, but I certainly didn't get the $81 million right there. That's like one of those you think about, if I won the Powerball like 2 weeks ago, what am I going to do? Right.
Like Chris Lowe, he talked about he was going to have a chiropractor and masseuse like in a guest house on call 24/7. Chris Doring said a yacht.
I'm a yacht guy. I'm a big boat guy. Now, my problem is I like really, really nice things. So I don't even know if that would cover my tab. Like the $2 billion one. If I would have won the $2 billion Powerball, I definitely would have tried to go out buy a really nice, get a nice yacht for some time in the Bahamas. In the islands.
Hang on, Coach, are we talking about a yacht that you could like land a helicopter on? Kind of yacht?
I don't need it that big.
Okay.
I don't need it that big, but pretty comfy and cozy, like really nice. Like, I mean, and one that's not like tiny.
Right.
I mean, I got a plane to get back and forth to it. And then I buy a really nice land and, maybe might call Chairman Ridley, who I know, Fred Ridley from Augusta National, say, let's go consult. Let's look somewhere really nice and build my own golf course. That'd be pretty nice.
That's awesome.
But that's a lot more than like, hey, that you need like Nick Saban buyout money to do that, not just John Fisher buyout money, right?
Well, it's kind of like the quote David Lee Roth had from Van Halen. Larry King asked him, "Can money buy you happiness?" And David Lee Roth, Diamond Dave, said, "No, but it can buy you a yacht and you can pull up next to it."
That's awesome.
Well, Coach, for our listeners, um, tell us about the hiring process when you were at Florida or anywhere, and another school comes calling. Tell us about the process, because we heard when you were the coordinator at Florida and looking to become the head coach at Mississippi State, there were stories of planes in the middle of the night and hotel rooms in Atlanta. I mean, are we ordering Papa John's at 1 in the morning? I mean, what's the time frame on this?
So,
And who's in the room? Is it an athletic director? Is it a booster? Is it? I mean, what's the process like?
I think the hiring process is very different when maybe you're a coordinator than when you're a head coach.
Okay.
At a school. And because I think, everyone has the dream of becoming a head coach one day. Right. So when you're a coordinator, when I was the offense coordinator at Florida, and it was kind of a funny deal. And we were getting ready to play. We had already clinched the East, and we had to play Florida State. And I think we had a bye week. No, it wasn't. We were playing, you're in the this week coming up. So we were playing a small school.
Right.
Then you have Florida State, then you had Alabama. Florida State, then Alabama in the championship game. And it was really funny. So Urban came in on Sunday, but like a couple weeks before, and he said, okay, hey, this group of guys are working on Florida State. This group of guys are working on Alabama. And Dan, since you're the coordinator and, you guys are doing all the advanced prep work, like our whole staff. And he's like, Dan, just you do whoever. We were playing like a Western Carolina or somebody. Mm-hmm. And so I went in and did all that stuff. And then in this time of year, there's jobs coming open. And so I'm working on those game plans. And I'd meet with everybody and say, hey, here's what we're doing, right before we got to practice and get everything organized. And then we had some of the coaches, and there were calls coming in, and they're saying, hey, we'd like you to interview or talk about this job or interview for that job. And I said, listen, I even as an assistant, I was not in. I said, hey, you know what? I'm committed to our team here. I said, we have these 2 games, but the day after the SEC championship game, I'm willing to talk to anybody. Then I got mad because I think 2 of our assistants interviewed for jobs while they were supposed to be doing all this prep work. They were out interviewing for jobs. So we got to Florida State and Alabama week. I'm like, you have that work? Like, I was on job interview. I didn't do any of it. So I had to get all that done. But anyway, so we played the SEC championship game. We beat Alabama. We're going up the national title. I go in the locker room, and 2 of the jobs I think had already hired that wanted to interview me had already hired people, and I didn't talk to them because I was waiting after the championship game. So I get a call and I said, hey, Mississippi State wants to talk to you. And I said, great. I got a call on Friday before the game. And I said, listen, can we set something up on Sunday after the game? I want to focus on getting to another national title. And so on Sunday morning, I get a call, and it's Greg Byrne, and we're on the phone for about 2.5 hours. And on that Sunday. And I think things go well. And he's like, okay, hey, if something happens, we'll meet you in person, and we want to do this. Don't want anybody to know about it. I think somebody said that we had spoken on the phone. So like in the newspaper, it mentioned someone came out and said that we had spoken on the phone. So I'm like, somebody leaked something. It wasn't me, but my name's out there. And I guess that'll probably make him mad. And I didn't hear anything from him. So I guess I'm probably not going to get a call. So I went on the road recruiting, and it was a Tuesday. I went on the road recruiting, and hold on one second for me real quick. I have a dog issue.
Okay.
Had to help my guy get up right there. Heisman's really old right now, my dog, and so he's struggling, and he was trying to stand up, and he needs help getting up. So on Tuesday, it's actually a pretty fun story. So on Tuesday, I get up. I go out on the road recruiting up in Jacksonville. We have a practice that afternoon, but everybody's on the road. So a lot of those, I would go out and recruit locally, and there'd be a one offense coach, one defense coach, and Urban like, hey, you got practice. So you're running practice that day because I'm out visiting people. And so I came back, and a real lighter practice. So I'm in this high school. I get out, and I have like 10 missed calls. And I'm like, uh-oh. And it's Greg Byrne like, hey, can you meet tonight in Atlanta? I'm like, all right. So I'm driving back. I'm like, ooh, okay. I really wasn't expecting this. I'm like, I got to go run practice. Right. So I call people. I'm like, hey, I'm calling my wife, John Clark, who was our director of operations for a long time for me, was the director of operations Florida. I'm like, hey, help me get some notes organized. I got to go do practice. I call Urban. He's like, oh, well, you got to run practice, so make sure you get that done. So I'm racing back. I call my wife. I run the practice. I run off the practice field. I take a quick shower. She has a suit waiting for me.
Oh,
I
wow.
throw the suit on. I grab stuff in the deal. I jump in the car. I think I'm on a 6 o'clock flight. I leave the football office at 5:15 for a 6 o'clock flight. I drive. I race to the airport. I'm like scrambling around. I'm like, where's my phone? It was, luckily it didn't fly off the car. It was on the windshield in the front of the car.
Oh my gosh.
I grab my phone, throw it in my pocket. And they're like, call when you get to Atlanta. So because it's like all top secret.
Right. And they're still in the plane, right?
No. I'm on Delta.
Oh, wow.
And I'm leaving to go on a recruiting trip from there. So I have like a bunch of stuff packed after the interview because I'm going out on the road to go see Jordan Reed up in Connecticut, the great NFL tight end now, and he was a quarterback in high school. So I land in Atlanta, I get off, and I pick up the phone, and they're like, hey, we're going to meet, take the MARTA station to this stop, and we'll tell you what hotel we're in. It's like all like clandestine top secret stuff, I guess. So I'm like, all right. So I'm on the MARTA, like in a suit with like a briefcase and a suitcase. I get off and they're like, okay, we're over at this hotel. So I'm like, all right. And we'll meet you in the lobby. And so like, I'm like catching my breath. And I mean, I haven't had a chance to even breathe because it's like racing back from Jacksonville, run practice, get on the plane, review my notes, organization. And so we go up to the hotel, and honestly, I think we start meeting. It's about 9 o'clock that night. And we start meeting. And so around midnight, they're like, hey, can we take a quick break? You know, Greg Byrne ordered like this giant cheeseburger, and he's eating a cheeseburger. I don't think I've eaten, but it's one of those, they're like, hey, do you want something to eat? Well, I'm not going to eat in the interview. I'll end up, if people that know me know, like, I mean, there's about 99.9% chance that something's going to end up on my shirt when I go. Right?
We're related, Coach.
So about midnight, we take a break. And they're like, hey, we got a room for you downstairs. So I go put all my stuff in my room. I'm like, hey, I think this is going really well. So then we go and interview to about 2 o'clock in the morning. I go back to my room. And I'm like, hey, I call my wife. I said, I think they're going to offer me this job. I think this is going really, really well. And then a couple minutes, and I'm like, thoughts. And then I hang up. Like Greg knocks on my door one more time. I'll go to my room. It's like, hey, really love everything. Can we talk at 7 a.m. And like just one more thing. I want to talk tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I think they were probably pretty set they were going to hire me at that time. And I think everybody just wanted to go to sleep on it. And before they, wake up in the morning and still feel great about it. So I'm like, I'm like, all right, great. So I called Megan. I'm like, hey, I've never seen the place. They say I can't see it. I can't do anything. You're kind of taking it sight unseen. And she's like, well, I went and covered the women's mid-am at Old Waverly. She's like, as long as they throw in a membership to Old Waverly, take the job. She's a golf girl. So the next morning they walked in and I said, hey, we want to offer you the job. I said, hey, I didn't really mention the Old Waverly thing. I said, don't worry about it. I said, we can afford a membership to Old Waverly if we need to. If it's not thrown in at that point, we'll be an SEC head coach. We'll be okay. They offer you the job. And I said, absolutely. And then it's a whirlwind. I called Urban, said, hey, they offered me the job. I'm going to take it. And I said, just give you a heads up. I'm busy. Someone needs to go. Jordan Reed's waiting for somebody to come see him. So get somebody up and go see Jordan.
Wow.
And, you get kind of whisked into a car. They're like, hey, we're going to go fly down and pick your wife up in Gainesville. I'm like, all right. And I'm like, looking at the calendar, I said, I'm going to be there through right before Christmas. I told her, throw just everything you can, like as many clothes as you can in the bag. We're getting on a plane. The plane's going to pick us up. So she got on the plane. We had these bags loaded full of stuff. You race out. I remember them introducing me at the basketball game, and I'd never been in Starkville before. They're introducing a basketball game, driving around. We'd go to Greg Byrne's house. you really haven't slept in 2 days and you're like shaking hands and doing all this stuff. Then they drop you off and you're like, holy cow, this is amazing. I think someone picked me up the next morning, or they gave me a car or something. I forget exactly, but you walk in the next morning, you go sit at that desk. You're like, holy cow, what do I do now? Now I'm the head coach. Everybody's coming to look for you. And I was really fortunate. A young guy named Jody Wright, who's now coaching at South Carolina, and he coached at Alabama for a while. If everybody remembers Jody, he walked in. He was the administrative assistant, like a grad assistant at the time. And he's like, Coach, I don't know if you're keeping people, firing people, what you're doing with the whole staff and all this stuff. He goes, I'm a grad assistant. This is what I do. But he goes, here's a book with everybody that we're currently recruiting and what's going on with our recruits. Here's a book of our current players and all this stuff. Here's some things work. And if you need anything, like if you need to figure out how things work. And I said, hey, I looked at him. I said, hey, well, I guess I'm hiring somebody. Would you like to be our new director of football operations if you're that prepared? He's like, yes. I'm like, good. You got the job. So I've hired one person so far.
Wow.
But it was, what's funny is, and you look back at that first team, that first recruiting class we had there, I got online before that job and I'm like, hey, my guy, I knew I had been recruiting Chad Bumpus, so I knew him. And I'm like, I'll get Chad, and I'll get him come play for me because I was the one recruiting him and knew him. And I got online. The first guy I looked at was Fletcher Cox. And I said, they don't have a coach. And this guy's committed to Mississippi State. I said, if this guy's committed to Mississippi State currently without a coach, we can win football games right there.
Yes.
And we won an awful lot of them. So it's a crazy whirlwind when you get hired as a head coach and what goes on with it all.
I'll ask this before we head to break. Who's in the room? I mean, obviously Greg Byrne was there.
So Greg Byrne ran it all.
Representation? Is it just you?
No, just me. Greg Byrne, Scott Strickland was there, and John Cohen was actually there.
Wow. We'll bring that up after the break.
All right. Well, we got to take our next break, and when we come back, we are going to finish up the interview with Coach Mullen. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show right here on Tide 100.9. Go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tide 100.9 ESPN Radio here in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Our guest today, you can see him on College Football Final. You saw him in the SEC Championship more than once. He's the former head coach of the Florida Gators and Mississippi State Bulldogs, Dan Mullen, our guest. Coach Mullen, right before we went to break, we were talking about John Cohen. I'm going to hit on that in a minute, but Stingray, he used to do his rants there on Fine Bomb and Tosh.0 and YouTube Sensation, always hooting and hollering and screaming. But did the players ever get a laugh at those rants? Did your wife, was like, who is this guy?
My son would, because, he comes up like all the stuff, like he's, he grew up in it and he was young and all the different rants, that he gets on and all the different funny things of people going off. But I thought Stingray was really good to me.
Yes.
For the most part. I'm sure, I did something here or then, right, as a coach that he kind of got upset with. But I thought for the most part, he was probably always good to me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I don't think Steven ever said anything negative about anything maroon and white ever.
No, sir.
So, yeah.
No.
Hey, right before we went to the break, I asked you who was in the room when you were interviewing for your job there at Mississippi State. You mentioned Greg Byrne, who's the athletic director here in Tuscaloosa at Alabama. You mentioned Scott Strickland, who's the AD now down at Florida. And y'all got to work together a second time. And then you mentioned John Cohen, who was the athletic director there at Mississippi State, who is now the new athletic director at Auburn. I guess Starkville is the AAA for athletic directors. But with that, did it shock you when you heard that John Cohen was going to Auburn? And what were your thoughts on that?
It didn't really shock me. I think the opportunity's been at Mississippi State for a while. And done there both as the baseball coach and the athletic director. So I think he's probably been there for a while. Maybe was ready for a new challenge. Obviously Auburn is a big challenge, but when you look at Auburn, I think when you get with athletic directors, and everyone is so passionate in the SEC about sports.
Right.
And the SEC is so great in so many, but everyone's passionate about baseball, and everyone's passionate about basketball, and everyone's passionate about gymnastics. And Auburn's very good in a lot of sports. Now, obviously, football trumps it because when you live in SEC country, as we all know, right, is being good at the other sports is a bonus, right? And it's a reason to make you feel good, but it really does revolve all around football. And obviously, I think he's looking at a place in Auburn where they're excellent in a bunch of areas, and they have to get the football part of it figured out. So that's a great challenge for him right now, and probably something he wanted to take on.
Do coaches get scared? I shouldn't. No, I don't want to use the word scared. Do coaches stay away from jobs? And we're going to pick on Auburn for a second, and we're not going to throw them under the bus. But we've seen that the boosters have run that program over there. We've seen them have a very short leash. I thought Gus didn't get a fair shake there toward the end. And then you bring in Brian Harsin, who I really didn't think got a fair share. I know coaches is a close fraternity, but when jobs like that come open, you're like, yeah, I'm not taking that Auburn job because, look what they did to Gus, and they didn't even give Harsin a chance. Is it kind of red flags like I'm staying away from it? And there's one guy like, man, I'm a coordinator. I'll go in and take it right now.
Well, I think you look situationally at a lot of things. Even at Florida, I had Urban and Jeremy Foley at Florida said, why would you want to go to Mississippi State? And as I said, I had looked and done a little bit of research and said, hey, if I can get some of these guys on this recruiting list and that, and great players. And then the more I looked into it and said, hey, Jerry Rice is from right there, and Walter Payton. And I know there are a lot of other issues that go in through the years, but there are so many great players Jackie Slater and Brett Favre. You just keep going through these names of all these great football players from the state of Mississippi. And I'm like, all we got to do is go get them, and we could be pretty good. And so as I looked at it, you do, and people will question it. But as a coach, you want to look at your situation and how does the situation fit me? And so I think there'll be a lot of coaches that maybe are more established right now at jobs that are going to look and say, okay, Auburn, they have facilities, they have resources, they have a bunch of things, but does it fit me in who I am? And, the Gus one you talk about, and I'm really good friends with Gus Malzahn, and the one that scratches your head, right? If Auburn fans could win one game a year, I'm guessing it's the Alabama game.
Right.
Right. I've never lived in Alabama, but I feel pretty confident in saying that one. Right.
Yeah.
Well, no one's beaten Nick Saban more than Gus Malzahn, but we're going to run that guy out of town.
I still don't get it.
But the Brian Harsin, and I'm friends with Brian. I think Brian's an excellent football coach, and a really good football coach. And when that hire happened, and I think this is one that would make people nervous, it was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. And I could see why Brian's looking and saying, hey, I'm going to come from Boise State. I'm going to go to the SEC. I have all these resources. I have all of this stuff to go succeed at a great school like Auburn.
Right.
What I don't think Brian saw was understanding the makeup of the Southeastern Conference completely, of not been around it a ton, if you will. And so I thought it was kind of a weird fit at first. And I think how that played out could maybe scare some people that aren't from around the area to sit there and say, okay, that, it was weird. I got hired at Mississippi State and I'm from the Northeast, but I'd been in the league for 4 years. I'd won. And, when I got to Mississippi State, it was, hey, if we can get to a bowl game every once in a while and Ole Miss, everyone will love you. Right. You beat Ole Miss some, we beat Ole Miss every other year and we get to a bowl game every once in a while, it'll be a great deal. And obviously that changed very quickly after we beat Ole Miss, year one. And then we started going to bowl games and everyone thought that's a really good deal. We like beating Ole Miss and we like going to bowl games. So let's do that all the time. And it changes the makeup job that other people have had to walk into now. But Auburn the same way is, people are going to look at it and say, okay, what's the setup for me to succeed? And, where am I at in my current position? Is that a better place for me to be? Obviously, I don't think there's a coordinator in the country that wouldn't jump on that job.
Right.
But,
Right.
to get an active sitting head coach, they're going to look at things. And if you look at some of the big hires last year, for example, okay, you have Lincoln Riley, who's at Oklahoma saying, okay, I'm at Oklahoma. Great job. But I'm leaving my state a lot of times to get all my top players, and we're going to the SEC. And so I'm going from one of the premier jobs in my league to, hard to say they're going to be number one when they get in the league. They were one or two in their current league, but they're going to move. It's hard to say they're one or two in the pecking order.
Right.
I'm leaving to go to SC, where I currently am, like, pretty much number one. And I mean, I can drive recruiting everywhere. I'm a national brand. I have all this stuff. Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame. Notre Dame, a premier job.
Right.
But LSU, where I don't even have to leave my state to go get players that can help me win a national title. And he had to play the SEC and saw the type of players that they have.
Yes.
So are those style of coaches out there that are looking at Auburn and thinking the same thing? And I don't know if they are with what's gone on over the last couple of years. They're saying, hey, resources, yes, players, check, but is the stability, is everything set up for me to be better there than where I'm currently at for what I want to achieve and what I want to accomplish?
Well, Coach Mullen, I have two questions for you about your time at Mississippi State. The first one is, back in 2010, you guys had the opportunity to go back down to the swamp and take on your former boss. Mississippi State pulled the upset. Talk about what that meant to you to go down to the swamp and beat Florida and Coach Urban Meyer.
I think that was huge
It was.
for us. And I think we were, if everybody, you go back to that game, and you were looking at how do we win this game?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember meeting as a staff, and that the Florida defense was really a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. They were takeaways. They had scored a bunch of defensive touchdowns on the year. And, and their offense was kind of almost struggling with their identity. And I knew that because I knew it inside and out and knew the players, and Tebow had left, and they were trying to figure out what they were doing and how to do it. From the year before, and they'd had some turnover within the staff for Urban. And so we go down, and I'm sitting there, and I said, hey, I remember meeting with Manny Diaz and saying, hey, we're going to win this game defensively. We got to not put the defense in a bad situation, but you have got to be able to stop. And he said, I think we can stop them and slow them down. And going to Florida, if and anybody that knows Florida, they love points.
Yes.
They love points. So I said, okay,
they love offense.
How do we slow this game down to like a grinding halt almost, to get the crowd out of the game, get them booing, get them frustrated, get them annoyed. And then how do we go peck away? And I think we, if we remember that, I think we ran the ball 43 consecutive times. We didn't throw a pass after the second quarter. We didn't throw a pass. I'm like, we got up 10-0. I'm like, hey, I think we might have enough points to win.
Right.
And we did. And now we had a great defense. And that was one of the big turning points at Mississippi State. And I think it actually went back a couple weeks earlier playing Georgia, is we were struggling. Year one, I went 5-7 at Mississippi State. It was the only year out of there. I don't think we didn't make a bowl game that I was there. The only year we didn't go to a bowl game was our first year. Now we beat Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl, and there was some momentum going into the offseason, but we had a tough schedule the next year. We played Georgia and Florida from the East.
Yeah.
So you're looking. We had lost a couple. We had lost to Auburn in a close game at home, and they went on to win the national championship that year. We lost to LSU, and we found a way to beat Georgia. And at that moment, I think it kind of turned around my entire time at Mississippi State. Our players started to believe like we could be good. Then we win the game at Florida, and we went on to go to the Gator Bowl and have a top 15 team that year. But it was listen, that was one of the more exciting wins at Florida. To go down there, anytime you can go back to where you were,
Right.
and you get a win, there's something that's a little bit more to it, and the players know that. You know what I mean? The players at Mississippi State knew they wanted to win for them, and hey, we're going to play Florida and all this. It's great, but they knew it meant a little bit more to me, and
Yes.
they came up and performed.
Okay. And the second question about Mississippi State, the thing that Mississippi State fans loved about you was that you always prodded Ole Miss when you needed to, and you started T-Sun, the school up north. How did that all come about, Coach?
Was
Well, if
it
you go
Woody?
It all goes back to Woody Hayes and with
There
Urban.
you go.
I'd
That's
been
what I
with
thought.
Urban, and he kind of had that we don't ever talk about our rival's name. So we got to Bowling Green, and we never said Toledo. That game's this week.
That's great.
I think it's tomorrow night, the Bowling Green Toledo game, in some action. And that is such a big rivalry. Then we got to Utah and the Utah BYU, which
Holy War.
the Holy War. And if you haven't seen it, and I've coached a lot of places, and trust me, in big games, I think that's the nastiest of all rivalries.
Right.
The Utah
Really?
BYU, which people are going to say, "Oh, hold on," and where we are that's a nasty one. But you know what? And a lot of it is, so we had those built in. At Florida, you didn't really have it. You had Florida State. We weren't going to mention them, but you had kind of Tennessee was a rival to a lot of people. Georgia was a rival to a lot of people. Florida, so you didn't really have the one. Right. So when I got to Mississippi State, I'm like, okay, and everyone thought, like, this is such a big game. So how do I prod and get under their skin, and how do we make this such a big game? And at the time, Ole Miss had been doing okay, and we hadn't. So I'm like, okay, how do I kind of get us going, build our fan base up, create this excitement, and do it? And calling them the school up north, and everybody bought into it. And,
yeah, they did.
And it really, and then it got under people's skin. I remember going recruiting, and after we won, I remember walking to this high school, and this counselor was in there, and this lady goes, "Coach," say, "Hey, I'm an Ole Miss girl, but I want you to know that we pray for you and your family every single day." And I said, "Well, that's so nice of you. You know what I mean? I know the rivalry's heated, but it's nice you to pray." She goes, "Yeah, we say a prayer every night that you and your family get the hell out of the state of Mississippi and go coach somewhere else." And, and you knew then that it was working. And unfortunately, you know what? The thing was, if there's one thing that got bad, it kind of got heated to a point. It got really almost nasty for a lot of fans and people.
Yeah.
And when both schools were down, I thought it was good because it gave a lot of relevance to us.
Yes.
To the schools.
Yeah, it did.
And then all of a sudden, both schools built up, and both schools maybe if you will, use that motivation to get on the national stage.
Mm-hmm.
And at the back end, I almost kind of, if people, and I don't know if anybody ever noticed, I started pumping the brakes on it a little bit because we didn't need that anymore. Both schools had kind of moved into this national. We didn't need this kind of heated, crazy in-state rivalry to get ourselves going. There was a point that they were saying we're number one and number two in the country. Mm-hmm. And so you don't need that as much, but at that point, I think it had created a snowball that had become such not that it wasn't always in the past, but that became such a big deal that it was hard to slow it down a little bit at the back end. Once we had the relevance that you didn't need that as much anymore to become be on the national stage and become the program where we wanted it to be, which was to compete for championships.
And Coach, my final question for you is this. There was a segment, I think it was back on College Game Day one year, where you read mean tweets, and there was a GIF that it comes from it that says "Merry Christmas, Shitters Full." Talk to us about how that all came about, please.
Well, I guess people always said that, like, hey, all the Ole Miss fans for sure, they thought, right, there was two things, I think. One, I was what's that I was in part of what's the Tom Cruise religion right there? Like that was one. Like I'm
Oh, the
Scientology.
Scientologist.
yeah, there's two that like I was cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation.
Right.
And one and two that my wife and I, because we're not, we're from up north, we must be Scientology. We're Scientologists or something.
Oh,
I thought, and I used to play off both of them. I thought one,
right.
I said, well, maybe they just think we're like a Hollywood couple. And so they think we're like these Hollywood type people. And maybe they think we're Scientologists because we're, I'm kind of more, I always view myself more as a Tom Cruise lookalike than a cousin Eddie lookalike, but I guess I was wrong on that one. Even though when I was young, people tell me I used to look like what Jason Bateman, like Marty Bird. I thought I was more Jason Bateman. Marty Bird, if anybody are Ozarks, what an unbelievable show that is. Then than cousin Eddie. But that was a big thing. Like, people would put it out, and you know what? The one thing, if you can't laugh at yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you got a problem. So I went and bought. I had a sweater that said "Merry Christmas, Shitter's Full" sweater.
Yes.
I wore to a Christmas party and took a picture and put it out one time, and everyone jumped on it. So,
Right.
you know what? I love having a good time, and
Yes.
if you can't laugh at yourself, boy,
Right.
you must have a miserable existence in life, and
Yeah.
people take things so seriously all the time. So I was able to laugh at it, have some fun, and I think a lot of fans. They laugh at it because I think they think it's something that maybe upsets you, and that's a way to bother you. And I don't know.
That was
So,
actually going to be my next question, Coach. Going back to you talking about the guidance counselor at the school praying for you, and they pray that you're going to get out of the state. What is something absolutely hilarious a fan has said to an opposing fan? Where was it? I want to guess LSU.
oh boy. Well, I mean, hey, listen, the LSU game. I mean, if anything, I remember one time I'm driving in, and there was like a family, and it was like a grandma. It looked like a family of people. It was like a grandma, a mom, and a daughter, like 3 generations on the side of the road. The bus is coming in, and all 3 of them grab their crotch area and tell me I'm number one with just one different
Right.
fingers. There's different ways to tell you you're number
Show you the
one, right?
fingernail polish.
And I'm like, it was like a grandma and the granddaughter both doing it. And I'm like,
Oh my God.
this is awesome right now. This is unbelievable. Driving into driving into LSU for that one. Boy, I got to laugh the one time I went on to go recruiting, and I took up to Oxford to see a game, and I took a helicopter in.
Nice.
And they had I mean like 6 sheriffs around me the whole time because they were scared to death, like it was going to turn bad in a hurry. And I
Right.
always thought, like, I mean, you have fun with all the different things, and especially in the state of Mississippi. The thing that I loved, in Starkville, and people say what they want about Starkville, but if you want a great place to raise a family, and the thing that made Mississippi so special to me in living there through all the years were the people.
Absolutely.
The people in Mississippi are such unbelievable people. The family values that are there. And I love it. My family, we loved it. That is just such a great place to do that. If you ask both my kids were born in Starkville. If you ask them where they're from, they'll say we're from Mississippi.
Right.
Wow.
That's the deal. But it's just because the people are so great there, and we had so many great times. It's so much fun. But coaching in the SEC is such a great deal because it's so important to so many people. You
Yes.
watch, and you know what? I was in studio the other night, and if you want the greatest example of that, is when you turned on Saturday night. We have, I sit in a studio and there's 10 TVs up that in front of us. Now there's no volume, which makes it hard. There's no volume, so you can't hear what's going on, but you could see it. The Texas A&M Auburn game on Saturday night, and you have 2 teams that are struggling, right? I mean, Auburn's looking for a coach. Texas A&M is struggling. I mean, they're figuring so many things out. And they showed that game, And I said, people think they always want to look at the top end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you go to the Big Ten and you go watch two teams that are at the bottom of the Big Ten play on a Saturday night, the stadium's not going to be packed. It's going to be half empty. If you go to the Pac-12, same thing, right? I mean, if you go you go to the ACC, same deal, right? The Big 12, same thing.
Yeah.
You go to the SEC, that place was sold out, it looked like. I didn't hear it, but I mean rocking. I mean deafening loud. The fan base is going crazy. For two teams with losing records playing on a Saturday night, and one's looking for a coach, one's trying to figure out what direction they're going in the future. And it's like it's the national championship.
Yes.
And that's what makes the SEC different. That's what makes it fun to coach in, to play in. That's why everybody wants it. And it's the fan bases and it's the people that make it such a great place.
Coach, I have a fun question for you. Coach Sherrill played his football here in Alabama, here in Tuscaloosa for Bear Bryant. And we've had a couple of Jackie stories on the show. And so since you were there at Mississippi State, is there a Jackie Sherrill story? Because Jackie, he's known as not as the king, but the Kang of Starkville. But as far as Coach King Jackie,
here's my deal with Coach. What Coach Sherrill would call me, and I have a great relationship, great respect for Coach Sherrill all the time, and what he did, and there, and man, he'd come up, and you could tell. I mean, he was so old school. I mean, have his ring on, and people that know Jackie, I mean, he's got the old school. I mean, his hands are like
massive.
Boom. I mean, massive when he shakes your hand and all that stuff. But he would always call me and he'd be like, hey, the best one, every time we're playing Kentucky. And he'd call and he's like, hey, coach, just calling. Dan, want to make sure they have that different type of grass up there in Kentucky. It's going to be a little bit longer. So
they do.
Have you met with the equipment staff? Make sure every year we're playing at Kentucky. We have the right cleats on to go play on that grass up in Kentucky. Now, I think they're turf now, but right. He's like, make sure our cleats are right and we have the right cleats to play on that Kentucky. Every year we'd play Kentucky up there on the grass. I'd get the call like, hey, make sure we're all lined up. We have this lined up. We have that lined up to go play up there and go win at Kentucky. We got to, just make sure all those cleats. But you would get those calls from him all the time, like all the little things he would worry about back in the day, the checklist. And, hey, make sure you have this. And like, I'd get calls like, hey, I used this speech one time. This will work. I think this could be the message to the team this week. But he was always great. You know what? I always thought I was pretty fortunate. And I think coaches sometimes, I don't know if they can embrace it, Listen, Jackie was such a great coach. Why wouldn't I embrace any opportunity I could have to have him around our program and around us while I was at Mississippi State? I had the same you had Coach Spurrier worked right upstairs from me.
That's where I was going next.
At Florida, and listen, Coach Spurrier is the best. You got to be able to, you got to understand who he is as a person, and he's going to take, he's always going to take some jabs at you, like a little, break your balls. But if you can't take it,
right,
boy, I mean, he's going to keep going and you're going to have problems. You got to be able to take it, dish it back a little bit and understand him. That's who he is. He's awesome. But why wouldn't I want to embrace having that person around the program? I'm not, I have a great relationship with Coach Spurrier and that's so much respect for him from the, heck, that's why I wore a visor. Coaching on the sidelines,
Wow.
And so, from early on. So, I mean, to have him around you at different times, always embrace everything to have those guys around you. And you just got to know who they are as people. And, and I am who I am. And, people are who they are. And you embrace who they are and you like it and you're not intimidated by it. You just respect it.
Almost everybody we've had on the show has told us multiple Steve Spurrier stories.
Oh, yeah.
And most of them keep saying, I can't tell you that one. I can't tell you that one. I can't tell you that one. But leave us with a great Steve Spurrier story.
So we're at Florida, and he came down, and he's like, I'm not going to do the voice because he'll get mad, right? Like, Coach. He comes in, and he'll be like, I was watching some film, and comes in, drew up a play. And he's like, what do you think? I like this against this team this week, drew it up.
And
And
he just barged into your office?
they come in the staff meetings,
Okay.
staff rooms. But he
So
knew
he
he's
just
always,
walked
I
in.
mean, I'd always tell, he'd walk by and or just come in and stick his head in and say hello. But I mean, I'd always say, hey, coach, you want to come in? We're watching some film. Come on, watch some film with us. And he'd come in. He's like, what are you watching? I said, 7-on-7. He'd sit down and watch a little 7-on-7. I said, we're watching Inside Run. He's like, oh, no, I'm quite busy. I don't have time for that right now. I got something else I got to do. But he'd just sit in on some 7-on-7 pass game stuff. But
that's great.
We get to run game and stuff. He'd be long gone. But he said, hey, Jordan, he's like, I've been here. The last staff, I used to come down and try to help them out. They never listened to my ideas, but, they scored like 13 points a game, so they must have had all the answers. They didn't need any of my plays. And just his Coach Spurrier way of doing things.
Right.
So a lot of times, like if he put something up that we didn't have, sometimes he'd draw something maybe we already had in. But I'd go and say, hey, yeah, we got, we have that in. But if he drops something new, I'm like, we'll put it in. Hey, we're going to call it Spurrier. And, and after the game, he knows he's a ball guy. So he'd know if when we ran the play or not.
Right.
So if we ran it, it worked. If we ran it, it worked, he definitely would be in and say, hey, I saw you, you ran my play and it was good. If it didn't work, you might not see him on Sunday or Monday that week, but, no, I mean, he was always fantastic coming in to do those things and to do it, but would come with ideas. But when he said that, he's like, hey, the last staff in here, they didn't like my ideas, but they must have had all the answers, scoring 10 points a game or something.
Well, Coach, if you were going to come to Starkville tomorrow and have lunch and dinner, where are you going and why is one of them Obies?
And why is one what?
Why is one of them Obies? I was guessing you might throw Obies out there. That's my personal favorite.
Is it?
I love some Obies. That jambalaya. Gator po' boy. Oh, man, yeah.
It is good. I'm trying to think. So, unfortunately, see, if I'm in Starkville, honestly, I'm probably going to have lunch over at Waverly because I'm not going to miss the opportunity to go play golf while I'm there.
Right.
All right.
So I'm probably just going to eat lunch there. Boy, that's a tough call for me of where I go. The Obies food is really good. The po' boys, I love my po' boys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna skip because I was there so long. I'm definitely not doing barbecue because I had so much. I've had enough of it. I'm good to go with catfish and barbecue for quite a long time. In my life, we did go back last summer, and honestly, we actually rented a car to go to Anthony's over in West Point.
Oh yeah.
If you've been over
was it
there,
Blues night?
No, but we had fun. I loved it over there. What's my other place? They got the little downstairs underneath.
Let's see. You talking about?
They have the little underneath downstairs part. The restaurant's upstairs, and then the underneath downstairs.
Geez. You talking about? Is it downtown?
Yeah, a Restaurant Tyler.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So if you go to Restaurant Tyler, and then you go underneath downstairs, they have the little area downstairs. I forget what they call it. Of Restaurant Tyler, the little underneath thing downstairs. Right. That's one of my favorite spots to go to, as well when I'm in town.
Good deal.
Right.
So no Harvey's and the fried mushrooms, huh?
You know what?
Delta chicken.
So the issue you get is you have recruiting at anywhere you do recruiting dinners. So you do umi because all the recruits love the Japanese, right? The hibachis. Like when you have a recruiting, like and the players, like anytime the players, I'm like, all right, guys, you pick a restaurant. Where do you want to do team dinner? They're like umi, hibachi dinner. Like, all right, they all want the hibachi, right? Because they're all getting triple rice, double chickens. Like, I mean, because those guys eat so much food there. And then you used to do Harvey's and all for recruiting dinner sometimes, for recruiting dinners. And so after you've done that for 8 consecutive weekends,
Right.
I've had everything on the menu.
You're done for the year.
I'm good. I'm checked out, and I've had enough of doing it. And anywhere you are. And so the hardest one, like sometimes you're like, in the life, like Megan and I, like, all right, you want to go out for dinner for date night? And you're thinking there because now you get that break time a little bit in February, right, where it's a dead period in recruiting, where it's kind of, all right, you not having anybody on campus for recruiting in February. And so, all right, well, let's have a date night and go out somewhere. Where do you want to go out to dinner? And you're like, I've been out to dinner for 6 consecutive, however many consecutive weekends for recruiting dinners at these restaurants. I'm checked out. I'm good. I can't take anymore. I just sit at home and we're going to just stay at home and eat something.
Coach, we had somebody on the show, and I can't remember who it was. It was one of the ESPN college football insiders. And it was right after the Nebraska job came open, and someone asked, I asked the question. I was like, I'm hearing Dan Mullen's name, but I don't think he's going. I think he's enjoying this year off. And they said, yeah, he's enjoying time with the family and doing the lake thing and blah, blah, blah. Coach, I know you're enjoying television. Would you return to the sideline here, not necessarily this year, but next year or the years to come? Do you think you'll get that itch to get back out there?
You never say never with that. I'm really close with Urban Meyer, and he and I have a lot of conversations about, that stuff and just life in general. I have basketball games to see my son every night this week. He's playing on the middle school, and somehow they got him roped up to go play some JV as well. I went to see him play a lot of football games, go to my daughter's basketball and soccer games, all fall. And those are things you weren't able to do in the past. My son's got a basketball game on Sunday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday middle school, and a Tuesday JV game. And I would have never been able to see any of those coaching. And you realize there's things you miss, and I'm really enjoying that part of it right now. I enjoy the TV side of things. So you never say never. With those, when opportunities will present itself, and if an opportunity presents itself, and I know it's the right opportunity, I would see myself go back to it. But it would certainly not be me. It would certainly be an entire family decision that we decide upon, that we want to go back in and we want to go do it, and that. I think one thing that I think, and your audience probably knows me a lot more at Mississippi State, more maybe than Florida.
Right.
But I think that, what? I don't know if you find anybody at Mississippi State that says when you're in, like, not just me, but my whole family, we were all in, and it's a family decision. I mean, it's not a job. It's a way of life. It's who you are. I mean, everything, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. How can I help the university, our players most importantly, but how do I help promote the university, and how do I promote the state of Mississippi? And how do I make this a better place for everyone? And, and that's your commitment, and you're all in. And so when that time comes, if an opportunity presents itself, and I think my family knows that, you're all in. I mean, if you look at the Nebraska, I certainly hope that when Nebraska hires their coach, and Scott Frost, I can guarantee you was that way, and it didn't work out for him. But you know what? He was a guy that I think that loved his players. He loved the university, and he loved the entire state of Nebraska. And I think for this entire time there, he gave everything he had to making it a better place. And I certainly did that at Florida, and I certainly did that at Mississippi State, and for everybody in the state of Mississippi. And, I'm still really good friends with the governor, with Tate Reeves in Mississippi. And because I remember having conversations like, hey, is there anything I can do? How can I make Mississippi better?
Right.
And not just the football team, and a lot of times it would be like, win some football. You coach, you win football games, you're making Mississippi better. And so we tried to do that a lot.
Yes.
But I think that's the all in, and that's certainly the responsibility that I took on my shoulders when you became the head coach at an SEC school, and really any school around the country.
Coach, before we let you go, December the 3rd, it's already locked in. LSU is playing Georgia. Could you please break down that matchup for us?
Yeah. So listen, LSU is going to listen. They have talent. I mean, anytime you play LSU, you always do the no look rule, right?
Right.
Don't look down the other side of the field to see what they look like in uniform, right? Because you're like before the game, you're like, oh my goodness, like guy goes running by and he's got like a 3 jersey on. You're like, that's their free safety. Like how big is he? Like, uh, so LSU's got talent. They're riding some momentum. They're getting hot. Jaden Daniels right now. They figured out what he does well. And they're riding that. They have some defensive talent, make plays, and they find ways to win football games. That being said, Georgia has more talent, more experience. Your quarterback's 25 years old. They're not going to be flustered by the moment. They're not going to be flustered by the scene, by playing in the game. And, so what Georgia's going to be able to do, as you saw against Kentucky, they're going to keep Jaden Daniels in the pocket and make him have to win the game from the pocket. Even though LSU maybe has the receivers to do that, I don't know if that's his strength, and that's not Jaden Daniels' strength to go win the game from the pocket. So they will certainly slow down that LSU offense and really limit what they can do offensively. And then on the flip side of the ball, Stetson Bennett just makes great decisions. I mean, every week on college, we're doing the highlights on College Football Final, and he's running in for a touchdown. And you're like,
Yeah.
he's just more athletic than anybody gives him credit for in extending plays. They can run the football, not as good as they maybe have in the past, but they run the football, and they do a great job with the tight ends of, Todd Monken does a great job with that offense of utilizing his playmakers. If they have a weakness, I think Georgia right now, it's at the explosiveness at the receiver position outside. So, Todd does a great job of utilizing the 10 tight ends as their big playmakers. I think the emotion and the talent will keep LSU in early, and I think in the second half, Georgia will pull away to win by a couple of scores.
And Coach, my last question, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think you're going to smile when you hear my question.
I always smile.
Would you ever consider coming back to Starkville? I know you said it's a family decision and your kids are there from Mississippi. But if the opportunity ever came up one day, whether it be 2 or 15 years from now, would you ever consider coming back, or can you go back?
You never say never to do anything, but I had such a magical run, and I thought we did such a great job, and I enjoyed the people and the times there so much. You'll never say never, but I don't know if you'd go back, and my pressure would be to get it back to where we were, to get back to being a top team. And
that's what they would want.
And that's what everybody would want. And it's a different time. And I love those memories. I don't know. I'm not someone who always looks back in life, always try to move forward and keep going to the next start of life. So that might be a hard one, but you never say never, Right. Like I said, I loved my time there. I loved all my players. I got Zach Smith that played for me there. And if you ever go back, you brought up the time going to Florida. He's the one if you ever see when the field goal went wide right, the player jumping on top of him, he just started and opened his company is building a huge factory right there out by the airport. And he's from Alabama, went back there and building the business in Mississippi. That's how the people are. But he texted me this morning, and all the players, all the fans, all the those things I loved about Mississippi State. And my family and I go back. My kids have a lot of friends there. We go back. We went back this summer for a little bit to hang out. We always love going back there and enjoying that. But I don't know if that would be in the cards. But you never say never. I don't.
Right.
I think they got a great coach. I think Mike Leach is a good fit.
Yep.
I think you always got to do things a little bit different there, maybe than, it's not the most just traditional like everywhere. You got to think outside the box a little bit. And Mike's, I think, very different than me in my style of how I ran the program. But
Mike's different than all of us, Coach.
Well, But he's outside the box thinker, and I think that
Absolutely.
works. And you got to think outside the box at Mississippi State sometimes, and I think he does a great job of that, and is a great fit by getting somebody that's not afraid to think outside the box there. And always rooting for him to do well.
If you stayed one more year, would you have made the playoff? Because you had that great
We had
defense.
there was, you
Nick
know what,
Fitzgerald could run on everybody.
and that was one of the hard things. It just shows, like for me, that was the hard decision, one of the hardest things I ever do. And to understand this, I know there's all the stories. When I got hired at Florida, the first thing we did is the announcement was made that I got hired at Florida. I think it was at 2 p.m. or 2:01 p.m. I think it was 2:01 or 12:01, or it was a minute after the hour, because a team meeting started a minute before then. Everyone's like, "Oh, he didn't even talk to the team." I remember seeing those things that were out there.
Right.
I was on the phone with Florida. I said, nothing, absolutely no one can know I'm taking this job. I took the job the day before, until this time. And nothing got out. And I called Florida. And I said, I'm walking into the team meeting. You can announce anything you want right now, as I walked into that team meeting, so that the players heard it. And after I told all the players of what was going to happen, everyone's phone started blowing up, because I was, it was being announced I was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
But the first people that knew were all the players at Mississippi State. That was the first thing I did. And then the unfortunate one is, I think I gave a statement for Mississippi State to release, because you're on a whirlwind. I got on a plane. Like that afternoon, I was on a plane to Florida, because I had to go get going and get recruiting, get on the road, and kind of move forward to that next step. I gave this great statement of all thanking everybody and everything we did at Mississippi State. And then, a couple of days later, I started getting people calling like, "Boy, you just snuck out the back door. You didn't even meet with the team. You didn't do any of this." And then I realized Mississippi State never released that statement. They never released my statement. I don't know what the problem was, or why they didn't, or why the administration didn't want to do that. So I don't know if anybody remembers, my wife and I called the Clarion Ledger in Jackson and bought a full page ad, when I released my statement there, because that was the statement that Mississippi State, I guess the administration, refused to release, that I gave them. So it kind of leaked that I snuck out and didn't meet with the team. The first thing I did was meet with the team. They knew before anybody in the media, before it was publicly released. No one knew I took the job. The team knew first. I met with all the players. And the second thing is, I had to take that ad out a week later in the Clarion Ledger, because Mississippi State didn't release my statement, unfortunately. So,
Coach, we're in Tuscaloosa. You can say things about John Cohen. That's a joke. I
didn't name any individuals, but I'm just saying that it was a shame that happened that way. But just for all Mississippi State fans to know, I mean, like, hey, I loved my time there. Loved the players. Loved the people.
Yes, sir.
It just blows my mind that, and I'm not putting this on Cohen, but he was the AD at the time, but the statement never got released. That blows my mind.
It was a shame. So,
wow.
And for me, and you look at my life and my career, I was able to spend 8 total years at Florida, won 2 national championships, but the longest place I've ever been in my life is Starkville, Mississippi. I've never lived anywhere longer in my life. And then Starkville, Mississippi, 9 years coaching there. And
interesting.
So pretty blessed and had a great time there.
Well, State fans definitely love you, Coach.
Well,
Coach,
thanks.
Look, man, we really do want to thank you for
Absolutely.
joining us. And before we let you go, is there anything that you would like to give a shout out to?
No, I'm great. Make sure I'll be on college football final again this weekend, and who knows what the future is going to hold with on the TV world side of things. But hopefully I'm doing a good job. And trust me, in the world of social media, everybody lets you know whether you're doing a good job or not a good job pretty quickly anyway. So
and how can we hear you on XM radio?
So I'll be on on the with Chris Childers and Rick Neuheisel. I'm on Tuesday mornings from 9 to 11 with those guys on Tuesday mornings on Sirius XM 84.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, Coach,
please come back and join us.
Yes.
I will. Great to be with you guys today.
Right.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. All right.
Thanks, Coach.
Boy, man, that was fantastic there with Coach Mullen. We really do want to thank him for joining us. And man, I'm telling you what, that guy could definitely coach football. What
You
he
know,
did at Mississippi State was absolutely amazing for that program.
yeah, Coach Mullen. I heard Nick Fitzgerald say this on a podcast that he has never met a greater football mind in the world than Dan Mullen. He
Yes.
said he can scheme up against anybody, anything, against any player, any kind of defense, any kind of situation. He said
Right.
he is just phenomenal at scheming things and can see things that other coaches just do not see. He said he can break things down tremendously. It's a shame, and that's how Dan Mullen won games. You know, he was very good at doing that. So with that, you get on social media, you'll hear people knock about the recruiting thing and this and that. But whatever you want to believe, that's great. But Dan Mullen won games by outsmarting you. He
Yes.
clearly did because he usually had less talent than you did.
Right.
And look what he did when he had more talent than you did, Dak Prescott years.
Yes.
He beat everybody.
Right. And he took Dak Prescott and basically made him a starter in the NFL for Dallas.
If you don't know the story, Dak Prescott's mom, being from Louisiana, Houghton, Louisiana, and Dak Prescott proudly claims that he grew up in a single wide trailer there in Houghton, Louisiana. That's what his license plate says on his Fiori now. Yeah, I know,
Right.
single wide. But he his mom wanted him to go to LSU, and Les Miles wanted to make him a tight end. And Dan Mullen took him, and I mean, highest paid quarterback in the NFL. I mean,
Yes,
rocking it out with
sir.
the Dallas Cowboys. God bless you, Dak Prescott. Thank you, Dan Mullen.
Yes. Well, Coach, my gosh, I've lost it. Heath, that is going to do it for this edition of the Stingray Show. We hope that you guys have thoroughly enjoyed it with Coach Mullen. Please make sure that you tune in for the Thursday evening edition immediately following Hey Coach right here in Tuscaloosa. And guys, hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday evening, a wonderful Wednesday, and we are out.